You've probably had a manager at some point in the past and you were like, why did they respond to that way? How come they took this particular action? I don't understand. I said this, but they somehow understood something totally different. Because when you're speaking, like let's just say you're me as a D personality, as I'm talking, my directness will resonate with about 25% of the population. But that might not give all the information that's needed for a C. A C is going to be left with a bunch of questions. An S is going to be like, holy crap, let me avoid that guy forever. And an I is going to be like, he probably hates me. Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Accelerator Podcast. I am Andrew Scott, your host, and I am a multi-unit location owner for almost 20 years. And now we help restaurant owners increase their sales, grow their bottom line, and have more free time. We've got Dave Doyle, our client success director here. And today what we're talking about is the restaurant manager archetypes. And so what the hell do I mean by that? Is basically we all have different personalities, right? We all approach the world differently. We all view it differently. And I bet that you've probably had a manager at some point in the past and you were like, why did they respond to that way? How come they took this particular action? I don't understand. I said this, but they somehow understood something totally different. So we're going to dive into a little bit of why that is and how people see the world differently and how you can use that to actually have a better restaurant and make more money with your restaurant as well. Because we can even predict some of the challenges you're going to have based on the people you have in your team and their personality profile. So I guess, Dave, let's start off this conversation by talking about ourselves a little bit. So it stands for DISC. So there's 4 different personality types. I am a D personality. And Dave, what style are you?
I am an I, but an IS.
Yeah. And we're going to dive into a little bit about what all of that means. But first things first, I also want to say that this is a tool that we use with our clients. It's a tool I've used in my restaurants for many years, since probably about 2016 or so. I am a certified trainer in it. So I actually did have to go and take some courses on it. But it's a really cool tool. And we use it all the time, and I highly recommend everyone doing it just so we can understand each other better. And pro tip, you can even use it in your marriage. So that's also also relevant as well.
and just to add a little bit of color and context from my perspective as well, I've been using similar tools. Like so just for everybody to know, like there's a ton of personality profiling assessments and tools out there. There's color profiles, there's bank code, there's DISC, like, the Myers-Briggs things. So there's a ton of things out there, and this is just one of them. And this is probably one of the most popular and the most established. So when I first came to ownership, I was already very familiar with this concept in other ways, because I'd used some of the other tools extensively in previous capacities. But what I love about DISC is the amount of information that it provides, especially on the full assessment, and it's pretty wild. So
awesome. All right, let's dive in here. So let's start with the D style. So this stands for dominance, or as we sometimes joke internally, kind of stands for douchebag. Now, the reason I say that is because I am a D and I'm totally okay with making fun of myself. Now, what is a D personality? Now, a D personality, they will be the people, like their operating statement is get it done, right? They want to get it done. They want to get it done yesterday. Their main goal is making progress and making progress fast. Now, a couple things that really, really bother them are slow movement towards their goals, questions, things that would detract from their ability to then make progress. Anyone questioning their authority typically is a problem for a D. Also, spending too much time dealing with emotional stuff is very taxing on a D personality. But what does this mean in context? So like, what will you notice from a D personality? The D personality in a management role is going to be the person, when everybody gets in the weeds, they start barking orders. Hey, go do this. Hey, you do that. Hey, do this now. They are going to be the authoritative person giving orders, and they are just wanting to get it done and get it done fast. And so when there is a lack of control or a lack of structure, they will take control and make it happen. And so that is kind of the D personality. And honestly, when we talk about them, they also have trouble giving compliments. It's really easy to point out the things that are wrong when you're a D personality. Harder to give compliments. Just because they're naturally predisposed to finding problems. And so Ds normally find their way into leadership positions because they are attracted to positions of power and authority. So that's kind of a D personality. So now I will clarify, if you're listening to this and you're not an owner, not every owner is a D, by the way. Sometimes it just comes with the position that we might think that. But you've probably all had managers like this who would always be like, probably harsher than what you thought was necessary, and probably gave you orders, and, they just, yeah, man, that guy was a D.
I think a lot of times people classify those personalities as like old school or classic thinking, right?
Yep.
Like you think about that kitchen manager that is, swearing and barking orders at the team and stuff like that. And you often think about that as a little more old school, last generation or whatever. And it's actually not so much that as much as it is like personality style.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so that's a little bit more about D personalities. Now let's talk about the I personalities a little bit. So I's in particular, I kind of describe them as like the party starts when they walk in the room. They're the people that are like bubbly, like energetic and outgoing. They're kind of like the life of the party. They love to socialize, love to talk to people, all of that craziness. Who would ever want to do that? So those are the type of people that are I's. Now, I will say that there's a couple really good strengths. And I guess I should preface too, there's strengths and weaknesses to every personality, right? And that doesn't make them good or bad. It just makes them different. So for I personalities in particularly, like what happens is that they are attracted to positions where they can get recognized. That's their statement, is they want to get recognized. So their thought process is like, hey, if I do this, will people notice? Right? They want to get recognized, whereas a D personality, they just want to get it done. They just want to, and they don't necessarily look for that recognition as much. They still do sometimes, but that's not the driving factor. They want to get it done just because it needs to get done. I's are looking for that recognition. Now, the other thing with I's too is some of their biggest fears are actually disapproval. So if someone doesn't like them, that becomes a big problem for an I. That strikes them to their core because that's what they really, really want in life, is to be liked by as many people as possible and held in high regard. That's a big thing for them. And that's really important. Exactly, right? So we're going to get into how this impacts a manager's ability to do their job in a second. But I want everyone to understand that piece of it first. And another piece of it as well is that when I's get overwhelmed and stressed, they typically become more disorganized. And so that's a very common thing. When a D gets overwhelmed and stressed, they just kind of get louder. So basically they take more control.
And
their fear is actually a lack of control. That's their biggest fear. And so when they feel a lack of control, they try and take control. Where an I, when they're not liked, they get more disorganized. And anyway, and you can kind of see like I personalities in some cases, think a little bit more in terms of drama, right? Well, this person doesn't like me, and like that becomes more of a big thing. Whereas a D would say, oh, if this person doesn't like me, oh well.
Yep.
And you move on. Doesn't really matter, right? So now for S's, this is encapsulated by steadiness. That's what S stands for. And by the way, I stands for influencer. But S stands for steadiness. Their whole operating statement would be to get along. D's want to get it done, I's want to get recognized, and S's want to get along. They're the type of people which are very steady. They're very observant. They typically talk a little bit less than others. And then what ends up happening is they just want to support everyone. They want to help everyone. That's their biggest things. We see a lot of nurses who are S personalities. They just want to help everyone. Like they just, they're driven to positions like that. And so that's their whole thing. They want to help others. And so if like two of their friends are fighting, they're going to be the ones that are like going to go to their friends and be like, hey, like, talk to me about this. Like, how can we help, like, get you guys back together? Like, how, can I talk to both of you? And like, how do we get this back on where it should be? Now, the S side does not deal well with change. If there's too much change, then S will experience much more like anxiety around it. And basically, they will start to freak out a little bit more and get overwhelmed pretty easily by the level of change. Whereas a D, when reacting to change, that's just normal life, and they're okay with that at a much different pace. Whereas an S, on the other hand, needs a little bit more notice about that change, because otherwise it'll up their anxiety, and they'll be much more overwhelmed by that. And typically, S's very rarely will ask for help because they don't want to impose on someone else that they need help, because their objective is to support, and asking for help would be the opposite of that. Make sense?
Yep.
So Dave, so as an IS, how am I doing? Am I explaining that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is, like, I mean, if we had it drawn on the chart, I am an I, but very close to the S area, and on the outer edge of that. So very much away from center. Now, the interesting thing, and this is a little bit extra, but I also have shading in the D, which is a little abnormal. So I'm kind of a combination of the three, but more heavily weighted to the I and the S, and then also with some D. And what I would suggest is that over the years, because of my entrepreneurial spirit and tendencies or whatever, I have had to learn how to tap into my D personality at a higher level to be able to get stuff done. Because otherwise, if I was only IS, I'd never get anything done. And I'd need other people to support me in that side. Now, having said that, we haven't talked about the C yet. I have almost zero C in me. So I do need to supplement myself with other people around me to help in that area to offset that. And again, like you said, strengths, weaknesses, it's even less that. It's just, hey, we all have all four of these personalities within us. It's just they're weighted very, very differently. And so I do need and love when I have C people around me, because I love to give them that stuff to do because they're amazing at it, and it's a great collaboration in that way.
Let's talk about the C's. So C stands for conscientiousness. And when we're talking about C's, they're operating state when we get it right. And so the way I kind of look at it is that C's are the people that love to get everything like 100% correct. They're the people that love to have like no margin for error. It's like 100%. And it's like right on. And they're the people that are typically drawn to places where they can show their expertise. But some of their fears are around slipshod methods, criticism, around like not getting something right. But they are the people that would rather be 100% right and like 3 weeks late rather than doing it 80% correctly or 80%, but getting it done on time. So they're much more like, no, it has to be done right. That's just part of their thing. Whereas a D would be like, yeah, it's only going to be 80% done, but like it'll be done. So, like that's the difference. And so C's also tend to work better alone. They're also a little bit quieter, and also don't have as much of the like emotional component from a workplace perspective. Because if you think of it this way, like I's and S's are much more emotionally driven, where D's and C's are much more task focused, and they're more focused on the work. So let me give you an example. If I was to give a tasks to a D personality, the D would just go and start doing it. If I gave a task to an I personality, they'd be like, okay, great. Who can I go and work on this with?
Or talk about it with before I actually get to work.
Yeah, basically.
To get
and
more
then
ideas.
an S would be more like, okay, so let me take this, like, how can a bunch of us do this together? And then a C would be like, okay, let me go and I'm going to make a plan about how I'm going to go and do this thing by myself.
And then I'm going to come back to you and ask a whole bunch more questions before I get started to make sure I have clarity on the assignment and analyze it. And then I'm going to get to work.
So here's the thing. So now we've talked about the left and right of the disc circle. Now the top and bottom. Now the top of that are I's and D's. And if anyone's like, what the hell are you guys talking about? Just literally like Google disc and it'll show the diagram. So DISC, and the I is not capitalized, but the other letters are. And the top part of it, they are much more action oriented, whereas the S and C's are much more, they're less action oriented. It'll take them a little bit longer to accomplish things. So we want to understand that that's just the way that they work, because D's and I's they do more of like, you've heard the term like ready, aim, fire. Well, they kind of do like the ready, fire, aim. Like they will just go and get stuff done. And if it's not right, no problem. We'll just figure it out as we go. While the bullet's in the air, we'll change course, whereas C's and S's will be much more like ready, aim, 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 and never fire. And so they would just spend all their time aiming and never actually doing it. So now, how does this impact restaurant management? Because we've talked a lot about these personality profiles. I'm sure that you guys can see some of yourselves in each of these personalities. You probably know someone, maybe you're married to someone, and you're like, oh man, that's them. Like they talk all the time, and and some of your team as well.
And I'd suggest
that guy's
right now,
a real D. I talk about restaurant profitability a lot. And the truth is, most restaurant owners are hemorrhaging money without even knowing it. That's why I created the quick 7-minute training that shows you exactly how to track your crucial numbers in just 5 minutes per week, and a free spreadsheet to help you do it. The exact same one we're using with hundreds of our clients right now. So if you want to stop leaving money on the table, just click the link in the description below for your free copy.
Yeah, really think about your leaders in your business, like the people who you have working directly under you. If you're a business owner, who are your general managers, regional managers, or even your supervisors, and really think about the personalities of the individuals, even just based on the descriptions that we've had. I bet you there's some pretty good insight already.
Absolutely. And so here's what we have to understand about DISC is that everyone is different. And the reason why I mention that is because we view things a different way. And so that means we also need to communicate in a different way. Because when you're speaking, like let's just say you're me as a D personality, as I'm talking, my directness will resonate with about 25% of the population, right? But that might not give all the information that's needed for a C. A C is going to be left with a bunch of questions. An S is going to be like, holy crap, let me avoid that guy forever. And an I is going to be like, he probably hates me. Like, like they're going to get a very different message from what I say. And literally I just said like, hey, can someone go grab that customer? Like something simple as that. And we're going to have like all of these different interpretations of that same message. And so that's why understanding who you're talking to is extremely important, because let me ask you this. In communication, there is a sender of a message and a receiver. Who gets to decide whether that message was effective? The person sending it or the person receiving it?
The receiver.
Exactly. Because if they don't get the message that you intend to send them, clearly it's not communicated effectively. They're going to have a different thing. Actually, just this morning, I sent a message and I said I wanted a meeting every week instead of every month. And then literally my C, client success lead, messaged back and clarified. And I said, yes, but we didn't talk about frequency. So point is communication, that's on me because she didn't end up getting the right message from that. So as we're talking about management, let's talk about how DISC affects management, because every single manager that is in training, and usually most leaders, they have problems with two things. They have problems with delegation, right? And accountability. Two things that most people have problems with. Now, let me walk you through how each of those personality types will have issues with it. So Ds, they typically have an issue delegating because they don't think other people can do it as fast as them. Yep. They will typically do more themselves because they can get it done faster. Well, if I have to give this to someone else, I'm going to have to explain it. Then they're not going to do it as well. So I might as well just do it myself. That is a very D way of thinking
Classic
about
statement.
Things. Yeah.
I'm just going to do it myself. Or
if you want something done right.
If I want it done right, classic D
I'm going to do it myself. Yeah. So The other side of it too is when it comes to accountability, Ds don't have a problem giving accountability in the sense of the fact that they need to give it. The issues with their accountability is that it can often be very harsh, very direct, and if unchecked, it can also lead to heavy turnover, right? Because just picture the guy who's barking orders in the kitchen. Just picture if that never turns off and is like that 24/7. How many staff are going to be left at the end of the year? Right? Not very many.
It's just like picturing, Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen episodes, which, is that's not his only personality. But when you see the classic clip and meme of Idiot Sandwich, right? And he's calling people names and screaming and swearing at them and whatever. That's the stereotypical version or vision of a D.
Yeah, absolutely. So in management, if a D is left unchecked and they don't actually correct their problems and start actually thinking about the way other people want to be treated or what's needed, they will end up with nobody left working for them. Now, I'm not saying that being a D and giving hard accountability isn't necessary sometimes, because it can be. What I'm saying is that if that is too much and it's all the time, you will start losing people, and that's how that will go unchecked. Now, let's talk about an I. So an I, when it comes to delegation, an I typically doesn't want to delegate things because, and this is again the typical reason, is because they don't want to ask someone something and to be viewed as like giving work to someone else because they still want to be liked. So if all the I manager does ever give work to people, they are afraid that someone's not going to like them because they're the person that's doling out the work to everybody.
Yep.
Makes sense?
But also the I, which is me, doesn't get recognition if they delegate it to somebody else and they do it, then they get recognition.
Yeah, there's also that as well. And so I've even had people that, like, I've had people before literally come up with our after lunch cleaning tasks, and they would make a wheel, and they would put a task on the wheel, and they'd be the ones that spun the wheel, and everybody had to go and pick a task or something like that. But that means that they weren't the one giving it out, so therefore they weren't the bad one in the scenario, right? Exactly. Right. So that's why they don't want to do that. Now, accountability, they also don't want to give accountability to people. They're more afraid of it because they don't want to not be liked by the people. They don't want to be viewed as bad by the people. So what they do instead is they typically will pick up more of the slack themselves. They'll work more themselves to get it done, and they will just put their head down and try and do it because they don't want to give accountability, because they want to be liked and they hope that they just get recognized for doing a good job. The downside is that what happens long term if a team doesn't have accountability, right, and doesn't get delegated to, well, it turns into a team that at the end of the day doesn't meet the standards. And so then all of a sudden the I is going to have to fire people. And then the person is getting fired be like, you never told me that I wasn't doing my job. You're a terrible boss. And they're going to end up in that same position anyway, not being liked. So wouldn't you rather give someone feedback and give them an opportunity to change? Because if the outcome is going to be the same either way, you might as well do the hard thing now rather than the hard thing later, or you get fired as an I because your whole team isn't doing the job, right? Which one of those is going to be better, right? You do the hard thing now, or you get the can later. You got to pick one, right? So next thing, an S. Now, an S typically does not like to delegate to other people because they don't want to be a burden to other people. So they'll try and do it more themselves because they don't want to be a burden to someone else because they just want to help. And so they just do more themselves thinking that they're helping. And they don't want to give people feedback because they're afraid they're going to rock the boat. And they're afraid that they're going to make people unhappy and that people won't get along. But the problem is that if people don't get accountability, let's just picture your business right now. I bet there's some people on there that aren't doing things the way they should be. And there's probably some top performers that are picking up the slack for others. That happens in almost every business if we don't have good feedback. So what ends up happening is that if the S doesn't give feedback to the right people to bring the bottom performers up or gets rid of the bottom performers, what ends up happening is, even though they want everyone to get along, and that's why they don't give that feedback, well, guess what? Nobody gets along, and everybody hates each other because nobody ever then does things, right? Nobody ever does things properly, and everyone's mad at each other because nobody follows the standards and everyone's unhappy. So literally, by trying to get what they want, they eventually get the opposite of what they want. And the same goes for an I. The more they don't do what they need to do, they're going to get the opposite of what they want. It's basically that old saying. It's like, a strength overused becomes a weakness.
Absolutely.
Right? Same thing for a D. If they overuse that strength, they get exactly what they don't want. They're not going to get any results because there's not going to be anybody left in the business. Right? So, last one is a C. And again, they typically don't like to delegate things because they don't think other people will get it done right. So they would rather do it themselves because it will be better if they just do it themselves. And they also don't like to give feedback just because those conversations are very difficult. It's often more emotional
and too touchy-feely.
Exactly. Right. And they don't want to be accused of doing something wrong. Anyways, all those sorts of things. It's just difficult. Everybody has trouble with delegation and accountability. Right. But
just in very different ways.
That's a key part of management. Yeah. It's just a key part of management. If you don't do it, your business isn't going to go where it needs to go. And so I kid you not, I have had some examples. Now I'm just going to go through a few of these examples. And Dave, I'm sure you have some examples of people like this from your past. But I had this one D manager one time, and I kid you not, we were in the middle of a rush period. And I remember like the between the front and the back, there's a swing door. And I just remember being there to like pick up some deposits or something. Then all of a sudden I just heard this bang. And all of a sudden the manager was just like basically like barreling through that door and like swinging it smashed against the wall. And because like she was stressed out and frustrated. And so she was walking, and believe me, when D's are frustrated, you will know it. You can tell that they are not having a good day. You're going to notice. Because it'll be obvious. D's don't do great at hiding it. So anyway, I remember just seeing that and being like, man, and like, then all the staff just like, whoosh, just started like walking on eggshells. All the customers started going like, what is wrong with that girl? Like it was just a situation, and it was just so obvious because like things weren't set up properly before the rush period. It was more stressful. And so, she lost control of that situation. Her attempt to gain control was to run back and forth and like get all the things they needed and like bark orders to everybody. But the problem is that if you do that over a long period of time, people just aren't going to want to be in that environment. Yep. Right. So that is a D scenario. I remember there was this one person that was closing down my shop once, and she was an I, and basically, because she was an I, she didn't delegate enough of the closing tasks out to the other people that were there. And so she was the one that ended up having the final say and the final sign off on everything. And so she was literally running around trying to get everything done. And what's so interesting about what happened was that, how I say when I's get more stressed, they get disorganized?
Yep.
I came in the next day, and our like handheld phone was in the freezer for some reason.
How was it closed that day?
Yeah, I mean, it was just like she tried to do a good job, but it was like, why are these utensils on like, one of the customer chairs, and like, why is the phone in the freezer, and why, like, it was just like, why is like, so it's basically she was running around and like, oh my God, I need to place this produce order. And so she did that, and while she was there, and then like set the phone down, ran off to something else. It was just like total like chaos. It was really interesting, but you're like, oh yeah, she's an I. Okay, that makes sense. That's why that happened. So we worked with her on that, and then using a list to be able to like organize her thoughts better and stuff like that. But I've had I managers who just will be the most pleasant and bubbly people, but never hold anyone accountable. And then they end up just getting frustrated and quitting because nobody's doing the thing, because they didn't actually give them feedback and accountability. So that happens, right?
Yep.
It's a problem, and you need to learn to do that and deal with it. I also remember having like an S manager at one time as well. And here's the thing. I remember this very vividly because I'm a D, and you need to speak very directly to me. So for example, she told me, because she was one of the store managers, and she told me, she's like, hey, we're having a little bit of trouble this week, like, finding some people to cover shifts and stuff like that. And she was just like, kind of mentioned it offhand, like as I was walking by, and I just happened to pass the schedule. And I'm like, no worries, like you'll get it. Like I just thought that was like I needed to give her, like a boost, like, yeah, you're gonna get it, like some support that way. And then 3 weeks later, she comes to me and is very frustrated and kind of like in an emotional state. And she's like, you never helped me. Like I asked you for help to come cover some shifts like weeks ago, and you never did anything. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. Like,
what are you talking about?
What do you mean? Like, you didn't ask me to cover any shifts. She's like, yeah, like I told you that I was having trouble covering shifts. I'm like, so that means you want me to come in and actually fill the shifts myself, not just that you're having trouble. Like, okay, like, but did you say that? And so in her version of communication, by her even mentioning the issue very lightly, like, hey, like there might be this little issue that you might need to deal with, to her, that was like a cry for help. But for me as a D, I didn't recognize that as a direct communication. Whereas if I needed help, I'd be like, hey, I need you to do this right now. Like, so it's two different ways of communication. And so then, because that was something that she was really looking for, was looking for support in that moment, and I didn't give it to her, she ended up being very frustrated with me, and we had to, kind of sort through our communication style. So this is just an example of how that can happen. Yeah, I think there's all sorts of different issues around management, but there's issues for different reasons. And so one of the things is, once we identify which type of person this is, we can predict what kind of issues they're going to have and then help them navigate around those particular issues in management. Because otherwise, they'll just continue repeating it and making the same mistakes and not understanding why they're doing it. And it'll end up impacting you and your restaurant. So like, yeah, it's just
full circle. I mean, the whole point of this is self-awareness, right? And using this tool goes way beyond that. But the very first part is, when you understand your own DISC profile, you understand yourself at a much higher level. And, as you're going through those descriptions, anybody listening, they're like, oh yeah, that's totally me. Oh yeah, that's totally me. And if you've never thought about that before, if you've never done a personality profile assessment of any kind before, this, like, even just listening to the last 20 minutes could be like a big, huge light bulb aha moment for you. And that is the starting point. The starting point is understanding ourselves at a much higher level, understanding how we think, why we think that way, and most importantly, how we relate to other people and how we take on or how we understand their communication. Once we have that, now we are fully aware of how we think and how we operate. But then when you apply the same information to people that are around you, so Andrew, you mentioned right off the top, right? Like, hey, this is a great tool for you and your spouse. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Because when you understand your spouse, and the classic saying, opposites attract, that often is the case. You'll do the test and you're on one side of the spectrum, and then your spouse will do the test and they're literally on the opposite side. And it's like, oh, no wonder we don't know how to communicate sometimes, right? And no wonder it's like, we think about, like, often it's also, we think about, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Well, yeah, absolutely. But it's deeper than that. There's actually more to it. It's not that simple. There's also the personality profiling. So once we are aware of ourselves, fantastic. But if you actually do a test with your general manager that you are in direct contact with daily about your business, and have weekly leadership meetings within your business, and you understand that their personality profile is quite a bit different than yours, you now have the tools to understand where they're coming from, what their language is. So you now can, with that awareness, can communicate to them in their language, because you're aware enough to do that now. And they're going to receive that information 100 times better than if you communicated with them in your style, right? And that's where all of the rubber meets the road from all of this stuff. So when you can understand the team around you and their positions, the other beautiful thing is you can actually build your team sometimes based on this. Like, let's say hypothetically, you're hiring a general manager, but you know your style, and you know that you also have a kitchen manager and a front of house manager, and you know their styles, and you're like, you know what would really fit in is actually a D as a general manager, because we've got a lot of I and S and C in the other areas or whatever. So let's say you have 3 candidates for that position, and everything else being equal, you kind of get a sense of their personality style, and you're like, you know what? I've got 2 I's and a D. I could hire any one of these, but if I hire an I, we're going to have too many I's on the team. We need a little bit of D in our lives, right? So let's go hire the D.
Absolutely.
And that's going to actually round out our team personality wise in a much better way. And because we're, high level operators, we're going to do a DISC assessment profile with them, and we're going to teach them what that means. And they're going to be able to use all these tools in all their interactions with their team.
Well, think about it this way. Like, let's say you had all 4 quadrants on a boat going somewhere. Here's kind of how it happened. The D's would be the one that kind of set the direction. And they're like, hey, guys, let's go here and let's get it done by this time. And then the I's are going to be the motivators being like, yeah, let's go and get it. Let's go, everybody. And they're going to be the cheerleaders. The S's are going to be like, okay, everybody good? Is everybody got their seatbelt on? Everybody got their, their life jacket on?
Paddling together.
Yep. And then the C's are going to be the ones that are going to go, okay, let's figure out, let's plot the map. Let's plot the map of where we need to go. Okay, let's plot where we're going to turn. Let's plot like how we're going to get there just to make sure we're on the right track. Like that's how all of those work together.
Check the wind condition.
Yeah, just check the wind. Yep. So they're all necessary, but they're all different. And so if you talk to someone who maybe like is never getting stuff done on time, maybe it's because they're more of a C personality, and you need to talk to them about, your expectations versus their expectations. Or maybe, like who knows, there could be a lot of different things. Or maybe for an I personality, you're not giving them enough recognition that they need, which is probably true. If you were a D personality, I would just say that 9 times out of 10, that's true. As I'm saying this, I'm like, shit, that's true for me. So like that's it's a very common thing, and it's something I need to remind myself of over and over again. But before we go, I do want to do one little thing. Like, let's say that we needed to assign a task. Let's say we needed someone to go prep lettuce for salads, and I needed you to do 5 Cambros of romaine lettuce for salads for tonight, or whatever the case is. So how would I communicate that? If I was communicating it to a D, I would say, hey, Dave, we did 5 Cambros of lettuce as fast as you can. Let's go. Dave's going to be like, all right, let's go. And he's going to start doing it. If you were an I, which you are, I'd be like, hey, man, we need to get 5 Cambros of lettuce, and make sure you put your initials on them, because everyone knows that when you do the lettuce, it's the best. So everyone's going to notice that you did it. So make sure you do it great. All right. And so he's been like, all right, I'm going to go do some lettuce now. Sweet. Everyone's going to know that I did it. And then if I was going to give that to an S, I'd be like, hey, we really need to get some lettuce done. It would help everyone out so much if you were able to get these 5 Cambros of lettuce done, because we really need it tonight. That would be so helpful. Are you able to support us like that? And we're like, okay, yeah, I got it. I can do this. I'm going to go support the team. That's along that. And then for a C, it would be more like, hey, we need to get 5 Cambros of lettuce done. I need them all cut 1 inch apart, and I need it done it really well. And exactly 5 by this time specifically. Can you make that happen? Because I need someone to do it right. And they're gonna be like, okay, yeah, I can do it right. It's gonna just go along with that. So I know it sounds weird, and it sounds like, manipulation, but it's not. It's really just talking to someone in the language to motivate them in the way that they are naturally motivated, and the things that naturally are there for them,
It's the same task, and it's going to get done in all 4 conversations. It's just how you communicate it is slightly different.
But the person is going to feel better about it based on how we go about doing that. And so that's just, it's more likely to get done. It's more likely to get done better, and they're going to feel better about it when you communicate it in that way. So I think that that's just, an easy way. It's an easy example to do it. So anyway. So guys, if you want to learn more about this, you can easily just search DISC, which is DISC. And there's a lot of tools and training on it out there. I know we even have some, but it's something we use internally with our team. We help our management. We train our whole, coaching team on it as well. We use it with our clients, but really powerful tool. I've been using it for, 9 years now, something like that. It's just been very impactful throughout my life and really, really important. Ironically enough, I actually used to laminate the whole DISC circle and the explanation of it, which is page 27 in your workbook, Dave. I literally had that laminated, and I had it in my truck. So everywhere I went, before I went in, I knew I had to talk to somebody. I reviewed that before I went in and had a conversation with them so I could speak their language better. The reason I remember that is because someone actually broke into my truck once and broke the window, and they took a suit that I had in there. They took shoes that I had in there. They took the change that was in there. They did not take the disc laminate. It was still there.
That was the most important thing in there. That was the most valuable piece thing that they could have stolen from your truck.
Yeah, but literally someone has a suit that has my name on the inside of it out there. So if I ever find you, I hope it fits well, because it was a nice suit. But anyway, point is, disc is really, really useful in day-to-day life. And if you've never heard of it before, check it out. And if you have questions about it, we'd love to hear, because I would love to talk more about it. I find that's a lot of fun. So let's dive into that more at a later date, as well as some more leadership content. But in the meantime, guys, if you've enjoyed this, if you found it helpful, leave us a 5-star review, share it with someone that you feel it might be impactful with. And I hope you guys have a much more profitable week. We'll see you soon. This episode is brought to you by Ownership Training, where we help restaurant owners increase their profits while spending more time with their family. And if you want to know exactly what it would take to grow your profit margin to 15% and beyond while spending more time with your family, my team has a few spots open this week for a free 15-minute restaurant assessment call. Just click the book a call link in the description, and we'll show you the exact frameworks we're using to help our clients do this in as little as 6 to 8 weeks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.